Norman Finkelstein, let me start with you. Just outline from 1947 what happened then that you believe created really the problem that followed.
I think the problem that followed can be very easily summarized by two statements of the chief Israeli historian, Benny Morris. Statement number one, he said in his comprehensive history of the conflict, he states, one, that the fear of Arab displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. His second statement is the idea of transfer, which is what the euphemism for expulsion, the idea of transfer was inbuilt and inevitable in Zionism. That to me is the starting point. The fear, the rational fear of the Palestinian people that should the Zionist idea be realized, it would result in their territorial dispossession and displacement. It's no different than the fear of our own, meaning the U.S., Native Americans, that the success of the Euro-American enterprise in the United States would be at the expense of our native population. The fear, the rational fear of territorial displacement and dispossession.
Both sides have a legitimate cause for complaint. Would you agree with that?
I can't agree with that because we have to stick hard and fast to the factual record. The factual record is fairly clear on what happened in 1947 to 49 in the case of Israel and Palestine. Roughly 750,000 Palestinians from what became the State of Israel were either expelled or fled in fear and ended up refugees. Now, it's important to keep in mind, Piers, because you, and I think generously, agreed to talk about the background. Frankly, I think you're the first person I've noticed willing to talk about the background, that about 270,000 of those Palestinians who were expelled during the first Arab-Israeli war, they ended up in Gaza. So if we want to take the point as a point of departure, 1947 to 49, the point of departure for Gaza is exactly the same. That's how Gaza became Gaza. 70% of the population of Gaza became Palestinian refugees. Now, as to the question of what's sometimes called a population exchange between the Arabs who resided in, the Jews who reside in the Arab world versus the Arabs who resided in what became the State of Israel, there really isn't. I don't want to get involved now in a scholarly debate because it's simply not the time and place. But there isn't any good scholarship on what happened with those Arab Jews in 1948. Some, like the Yemeni Jews, everybody agrees they came willingly. The question of the Iraqi Jews, it's kind of a blur what happened. I'm not going to take one position or another on it. But I don't think those other aspects of the conflict ought to distract us from the fundamental question that you asked, and I think it's a very good question, to look at the background. And the background to what happened on October 7th, it began with the expulsion of about 300,000 Palestinians into Gaza, and now they comprise about 70 to 80% of the population of Gaza and their descendants.
Yeah. From your understanding, how many Jewish people were displaced from their homes in this early period? Because I've heard it was actually precisely a lot.
It was between 700,000 and 800,000, with probably $1 trillion worth of wealth. These were people who had lived in these countries longer than the Muslims. They had lived there since the Babylonian exile 2,000 years earlier. This is a complex situation. It's 75 years ago. There is a statute of limitations on things like this, a moral statute of limitations. Move on. Establish yourselves in the countries that you left and went to. Get rid of these refugee camps. Get rid of UNRWA and become full citizens of the countries you moved to, the way my grandparents became full citizens of the United States.
Let me come to Norman Finkelstein. Your response to that?
Okay, thank you, Piers. First of all, as a general point, I agree with the notion of a statute of limitations on your claims to a parcel of land. The first time I came across that expression was reading Arnold Toynbee's great history of the world, actually. And he makes the point in his history that isn't there a statute of limitation on the claims of Jews to Palestine? He said that claim was made 2,000 years ago. And it's claimed that, even today it's claimed that, based on what happened 2,000 years ago, there's a large portion of Israeli population who believes they have title to the West Bank, they have title to Gaza, because of that claim 2,000 years ago. Isn't there a statute of limitations? Allow me to complete my thought, and then you can disagree. Isn't there a statute of limitations on the claim from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago? Now, I want to focus on Gaza. I would like to focus on Gaza. The population is expelled from Israel into Gaza. Now, if you look at Benny Morris's history called Border Wars, he says that between 1949 and 1953, literally, listen closely, about 2,700 to 5,000 Palestinian expellees, that's including in the West Bank and in Gaza, between 2,700 and 5,000 Palestinian expellees were killed by Israel when they tried to return home. Now, Benny Morris says 90% of those killed were unarmed. They were what he called economic infiltrees who wanted to see their homes. They wanted to see their land. They wanted to see their neighbors. They were brutally, if you believe Professor Morris, brutally murdered between those years. In 1956, as you know, Piers, England, France, and Israel invaded Egypt, including at the time Gaza. What happened then? According to Benny Morris in the book Border Wars, he said between 470 and 500 Palestinian men were lined up and shot down. Now let's bear in mind, Piers, this is long, long before this entity called Hamas came into the picture. Now, if we fast forward to 1967, after Israel occupies Gaza, there are new assaults on the people of Gaza, this time carried on by, at the time, Agricultural Minister Ariel Sharon. Now, without getting sidetracked, I do have to say, Professor Dershowitz, every time I listen to you, even when we debated each other in 2003, I guess, or 2004, I can't recall, you keep escalating your claims about having written UN Resolution 242 or contributed to the resolution. Professor Dershowitz, I understand people have fantasies, and I understand that people have failings of memory as they get older. But Professor Dershowitz, when we had our original debate, you didn't even know who wrote UN Resolution 242. You had all these names. It was Lord Carradine. Anybody who was involved in the process would know that. So let's agree on one thing. We both, both of us, should agree to only state facts. And if we have any doubts about the facts, let's set them aside and try to give viewers, listeners, as accurate a record as possible. We can disagree. But when you engage in your fantasies, it really, to me, is very disturbing and disorienting.
Okay. Well, let me ask Professor Dershowitz to respond.
Well, first of all, let's get the facts straight. I was Arthur Goldberg's law clerk. Arthur Goldberg was the United States representative to the United Nations. He asked me to come down. I actually moved in with him at the Waldorf Astoria Towers and work with him on 242. Yes, I confused the name Carrington with something else, but I worked closely. In fact, I was partly responsible for changing the words. I'm sorry. I worked on the matter. I didn't work with Lord Carradine. I worked with Arthur Goldberg. And together we managed to get rid of the word Palestinian before refugees in order to make sure that the resolution applied both to Palestinian refugees and to
this is
Jewish
pure
refugees
science
from
fiction,
Well,
which
now
I
you're
can easily
now
prove.
you're